And we're live.
We are indeed. Hello, hello, everyone on the internet. Welcome. It is once again the October edition of the Ghost Show podcast, and of course, no Ghost Show podcast would be complete without our trademark theme song, courtesy of my business partner Mike Lafferty, who should be along momentarily. And I know we'd let lots of people down if we didn't play that. So let's play the theme that is being called in some quarters of the internet the best piece of music they've heard since Harpo Marx's adopted son Bill's score for Scream Blackula Scream. So here we go, folks. The Ghost Show theme. Now, you see, if that don't get you going, check your pulse. Check your pulse there.
Hey, so quick digressionary question, one I'm sure of many this evening. Was Scream Blackula Scream a sequel to Blackula?
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. A direct sequel, actually. And with the not inconsiderable addition of Pam Grier, who really adds.
Oh.
Yeah.
How many films are in the Blackula saga?
Well, you have the original Blackula. And then you have Scream Blackula Scream, and when that didn't make quite enough money to justify a third one, AIP moved on. So we never got the Blummy or or any of the things that in my dreams exist. All righty. Well, let me introduce my guests here, and then we'll get to our topic du jour. First of all, right next to me is the one and only Jason Walters, one of the great raconteurs of this or any other age. You know him. You probably know him from the tabletop game industry. His work with Hero Games and with High Rock Press, putting out some of the most intriguing, interesting, and one-of-a-kind products for that medium ever created. And also joining us tonight is my longtime friend and business partner, Mike Lafferty of Fainting Goat Games fame, and, of course, the godfather of the Banff family of podcasts. So those of you who got here late, you missed the kissing of the ring, but trust me, it's there because there are so many of us that owe our media presence to Mike and his support and his generosity. So thank you, Mike. Welcome.
You're too kind, sir. It's always a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. All right.
And thank you for those two Bamfsies over the years. Three Bamfsies. Thanks, Mike.
No, it was a pleasure. You guys
greatly appreciate it.
Good work. The Bamfsies, I think, are going to come back. We took a hiatus thanks to COVID, but I think this is the year we come back. So
awesome.
Well, in a world where there's only two coins of the realm, cash and kudos. Thank you for the kudos. Because there definitely wasn't any cash with that supplement that Mike Serbrick and I made, turning all the American folk characters into superheroes. So the award is greatly appreciated.
That was a great book, sir. I'm sorry I didn't make more money, but it was a fantastic read. So, Ghost Show boss, what are we up to tonight?
Well, I'm glad you asked, because Professor Christopher McLaughlin feels it would be a little unkind to present this podcast without just a word of friendly warning. We are about to unfold the story of Frankenstein, a man of science who sought to create a man after his own image without reckoning upon God. It is one of the strangest tales ever told. It deals with the two great mysteries of creation, life and death. I think this podcast will thrill you. It may shock you. It might even horrify.
Thank you for that homage to the 32 Whale film. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was great.
Yes, I have to admit one of the on my secret checklist of reasons that I wanted to get my own podcast was to channel Edward Van Sloan for at least a minute there. But I'm sure anybody listening to this probably recognized that as my version of the intro to the classic 1931 Frankenstein film. And Frankenstein, the book, the long running, endless, immortal film series, and the genre that it birthed of mad science. And one that one would think would be firmly rooted in science fiction, but it is very comfortably within the horror genre. We'll say that for now. Well, that's going to be our topic for today, and part of the reason why Jason is here is because he has one of the really highlight essays of our forthcoming anthology, Transgressive Horror, and he wrote a fabulous piece about the 1931 James Whale version of Frankenstein. And before I give Jason hand the mic over to him, give a chance to talk about it, I have to get this out of here. Backers, good news. The speaking of Transgressive Horror, it is in final layout. We are now on a massive bug hunt, getting rid of all the typos and such. And as soon as our little proofreading gig is done, you should have the electronic book version of it very, 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 very soon. Definitely by Halloween. So yes, so please keep your eye on the internet, your favorite the internet of your choice. Please keep your eyes on that, and we'll have news about the book being out there for you all to enjoy, and just in time for Halloween. How perfect is that? All righty. So Jason, what made you what of all the films you could have written about, why the 31 Frankenstein?
Well, I wanted to go back and look at it with new eyes, because it's been such, the actual Frankenstein's monster itself as a creation has been such a sort of staple of sort of camp culture ever since. You have the Munsters, you have Frankenberry cereal, you have all those Abbott and Costello meets Frankenstein movies, you have the Groovy Ghoulies, you have isn't there like a Marvel super team with Frankenstein's monster in it? That we're so used to it. We've been seeing it for so many years now that it's not really scary anymore. And I wanted to go back and watch the original. Well, in all fairness, I don't think that's not actually the original film version of Frankenstein. There was a German black and white 19-teens or 20s silent movie version of thank you Sean Vieira, the Creature Commandos. Yes, well said. There was like a German kind of impressionist version, but it's not anything anyone remembers now. I wanted to go back to the original film version, really, of Frankenstein, and see if I could sort of forget all that camp, all those Halloween costumes. Yeah, exactly. There he is. And see if it would be actually scary, without thinking about any of that. And the answer is profoundly yes. It really is quite an amazing and transgressive work of horror, the James Whale original version. I keep calling it the 32 version, but it's 31, isn't it? Sorry. Because Dracula was 32, right?
Dracula was 31.
They were both 31?
Yes. Dracula released on Valentine's Day. And then just a few months later, you got Frankenstein. So it was quite a 1-2 punch for Depression era audiences.
Well, they had to have something going on for them in 31.
Yes, indeed.
Excuse me just a second. I must consult with my daughter. I'm going to mute myself briefly.
Okay, sure thing.
No worries. I just got my son to sleep about 30 seconds ago, so I can understand the struggle.
And given the parental subtext of Frankenstein, at least the 31 movie,
yeah,
it's a perfect lead into this topic.
Well, both the movie,
yes,
both the movie and the book really are very much about abusive parenting, about being a negligent and abusive father in particular. Though I think Whale's version in 31 makes it visual, right? It's more than just reading about it. He puts it out there. I mean, look at all the terrible things that are done from the monster. He's frightened with fire. He's whipped. He's neglected. He eventually like fights his own father. Really, not in. I don't think really in the. I seem to remember in Shelley's version, the original version, Dr. Frankenstein is kind of chasing him across the Arctic wastes, and is picked up by like a Norwegian whaling vessel because he's kind of chasing him across the ice pack. Mm-hmm. But there really is a climactic final violent scene in a windmill in the original version. But I think one of the things that really struck me. Thank you. I think one of the things that really struck me about Whale's 31 version, and I think those of you that are that are film fans can really relate to this, is that there's really an excellent minimalist, very modern horror film buried in a film that's about 50% the stuff Hollywood made well put into it. Sometimes very literally. So you can sort of see this other film which has no romantic interest, no goofy Austrian Burgermeister Baron dad, nothing but angry villagers and necromantic mad scientists and hunchbacks and speeches about becoming God and stuff like that. No, like you can see what Whale wanted to make, and it didn't have half a dozen silly sort of housemaids running around chasing the Baron and doing comedy scenes. Not that you could argue, but and on the other hand, kind of criticizing the studio decisions is a little bit like watching people on YouTube criticize Kathleen Kennedy's Star Wars films. It's like, yeah, the bad things are true, but it did make $1 billion. So,
a wise friend of mine introduced me to the phrase, the ants have decided that the elephant must die.
Yeah. Come on now. The same thing could be said for the 31 Frankenstein, which was an enormously commercially successful film.
Mm-hmm.
So you can say, Hollywood ruined it. It was going to be this sort of Henry portrait of a serial killer minimalist masterpiece, and they ruined it with all their fluffy stuff. But it made a lot of money for, was it Paramount, I think?
Universal.
It was Universal. Yeah, it made a lot of money for Universal. So presumably the studio bosses knew what they were doing.
Well, so they drove the studio into bankruptcy. But at least at this point, they knew what they were doing.
Yeah. Well, they knew what they were doing in 31.
Yes.
Come on now. They knew what they were doing in 31. How many in that kind of early 30s period? What they released: The Wolfman, The Mummy, Dracula, Frankenstein.
Wolfman is post bankruptcy. Yes. Okay. The Limley family is long gone at that point. They're on their way to becoming the corporate Universal that we all know and are aware of today.
Cass, stop now. Okay. Speaking of comedy interludes.
Yes. not a bad Una or O'Connor.
Cass, do you wish to come over here? No. All right. Come on.
Okay. All righty.
So.
All righty. Go ahead, please.
So, do we want to talk about the literature, or do we want to stick with the film and the interesting mad science subtext? Because we can go back and talk about Mary Shelley and the Romantics and all the things that went into creating.
Well, I
the literary work
as one of the greatest raconteurs I've ever met. I am just happy and honored to hear your stories, sir. So I'm content to sit here and listen.
If you can hear my voice.
Well, it's yes. And Mike, if you have a question, feel free to jump in, please.
Indeed, I will. Well, hey, I've always been interested in the novel, and I am ashamed to say I don't know as much about it as I should. So if we could talk about that a little bit, I think that'd be really interesting for me and for lots of our viewers too. But I think Jason might have stepped away for a second.
Well, that actually works out fairly to our advantage, because that gives me a chance to bring in tonight's special guest star, our surprise run-in guest, Mr. John Polizak, one of the other leading lights of the Transgressive Horror anthology. Hello, John.
Hi, thanks for having me. Sorry for
always a pleasure to hear from you, sir. Okay, those of you who are fans of all things kaiju will definitely find John's piece on Godzilla King of the Monsters a must read. So yes, so another reason why we're excited to get the book out to you. All right. Well, welcome, John. We're talking about Frankenstein and mad science in general here. And in a way, Godzilla not directly related to Frankenstein, but kind of a common thread with it, with what is science and where is it going? Common theme, would you say?
Definitely a common theme. I mean, in the sense that, of course, the inspiration for Godzilla, I guess, cinematically was the Ray Harryhausen film, the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms.
Yes,
but obviously the Japanese had a particular reason to have a fear and loathing of a particular brand of science, which was atomic science.
yes,
and particularly not only the weapons that leveled Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but also the continued atomic testing off the Bikini Atoll, which was taking place shortly before Godzilla was produced, the original Godzilla, and which was given as the in universe as the reason that Godzilla had emerged from the depths to wreak havoc upon Tokyo. So certainly there's the theme that science unlocked devastation, and you even have that later at the conclusion of the original Godzilla with the introduction of the oxygen destroyer, where where one of the protagonists, I argue in my piece that there's really not a hero in the original Godzilla film, but or Gojira, but that one of the protagonists commits suicide after unleashing the oxygen destroyer that he developed, in the hope that the secrets of the weapon would never be realized by anyone else. Although I think the film infers that indeed it would, and mankind would have to deal with the existence of yet another doomsday scenario, with the oceans being turned into acidic sludge.
In a way, now giving thought to what you're saying, in a way that's one of the things about comparing these two works. Godzilla in its way is a much scarier universe, because in the world of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, there's clearly a god. And while we may not understand him, we may not agree with him, there's a clear set of rules. And at least as far as should we be digging up dead bodies and reanimating them, I think most of us would lean no on that. So yeah, but in Godzilla, there's either no god, or he's out on a smoke break, or maybe he's rooting for the lizard. In a way, it's the common thing, but in a much scarier universe. So, see, God, that's why I love publishing guys like you. You make me think.
Well, I mean, it's there in the title, Godzilla.
I'm not hearing John.
Well, can you hear me now?
John, we can't hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
All righty.
I can hear John. Can you hear me?
Okay.
Chris, can you hear him?
There we go.
Okay. Well, I mean, I said it's there in the title. Well, I mean, Gojira means gorilla whale, but in the English transliteration, you have Godzilla.
Yes.
So, I mean, as far as the Earth is concerned, he's the highest power.
Yes.
Well,
and please,
both works are. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was going to briefly apologize. The only force more powerful than Godzilla, my bulldog Jethro, is wandering around the desk, and he caught my audio cable there. So sorry about that. Yes, please go ahead, Jason.
I was about to say both the creators of Godzilla and Mary Shelley were looking at things they knew were possible. I would guess in the case of the creators of Godzilla, atomic weapons. In the case of Mary Shelley, she knew the experiments with electricity that were going on at the time, where people were, making frogs and corpses twitch and so forth, and then extrapolating horrifying conclusions forward out of it.
Yeah, there was the whole semi-pseudoscience of galvanism, where you had researchers experimenting with making, essentially the carcasses of dead amphibians move and twitch through the application of electricity.
They were doing it with human corpses too, right after execution. So, Shelley had, well, I don't think the science part of it was what she was leaning into when she was writing. She had her reasons for foreseeing things like this.
Mm.
Well, and also there was a strain of mad scientism, or the perversion of science as a end in of itself in Victorian literature, or in Gothic literature. I'm trying to remember if the novel El Rune predated Shelley or not. If you're not familiar, Al Rune dealt with essentially a female homunculus.
Yes.
That was developed from a particular arcane form of plant life.
Wikipedia says that came out in 1911.
1911. So
yeah.
That indeed would be post Shelley.
Yeah.
Goodness, what's going on?
Well, I would argue that what Shelley was trying to do as a second wave romantic was kind of capture a certain feel. Now there's a lot of discussion of what was going on in Mary Shelley's mind, sitting there in Lake Geneva with Byron and her half sister and Shelley and Byron's doctor who wrote The Vampire, right?
Polidori?
Yeah, Polidori.
Yeah.
But she had just had a miscarriage, so I think these things were probably very much on her mind. But I think if you look at the other romantics works, well, not all of them. I mean, they were a pretty varied bunch. But if you look at something like The Sorrows of Young Werther, which were sort of to the romantics what sort of the Ramones and the Dictators were to punk rock, right? They're like proto-romantic, right? There's a very similar mood to Frankenstein and I think something like Sorrows of Young Werther. So I think as a literary work, she was trying to capture a mood common to the romantics. Horror novels existed, right? But they weren't, Gothic novels were coming into existence. And we're talking about 1823, 1824, right around then, I think, when she wrote it, without looking at Wikipedia. What was it?
I'd give credit for that.
Yeah.
1818.
I think that,
1818.
1818. No, really? That early? Wow. Oh, that's right, because Shelley died and drowned in 23, right? Her husband. Interesting thing, when his corpse washed up on shore, her husband, Percy Shelley, they actually cut his heart out of the corpse and burned it in a ceremony of their own creation, the second wave romantics there on the beach. So
I had never heard that story before.
Yeah. Though there's some argument that there was some argument that they didn't do that, and that it actually stayed part of him stayed in a jar on her mantle till she finally died. I don't know. I'm sure it's there online somewhere, but strange doings from the second wave romantics.
I'll just be happy if somebody didn't get my wallet. Much less my heart. Oh, geez. Ooh.
But definitely have a different relationship with people in the early Victorian era. I'm not even sure that's Victorian, is it? Was Queen Victoria even on the throne in 1820? I don't think so. But
I feel like I didn't.
You definitely have a very different relationship.
1837, 1901 is considered the Victorian era.
All right, so we could use the term pre-Victorians, but that's kind of everyone before 18. So
if you say it pretentiously enough, no one will notice.
The pre-Victorians, yes. They certainly had a different relationship.
Victorians.
Yeah.
That includes
which
Vikings,
means
the
everyone's
Romans,
heard of Julius Caesar. They're all pre-Victorian.
dinosaurs are technically
Egyptians.
Yeah.
Yeah, pre-Victorians.
Yeah.
That's right.
Trilobites.
Plato, Aristotle, Xenophon, all pre-Victorians.
Well, there's only a few past eras, really. There's, epochs. There's, Victorian era, Age of Yore, old days.
We could just divide everything into BV and AV, just for simplicity for this conversation. But
or you can go with the Heideggerian model and say that there are epochs in which reality is completely different. That medieval man's reality was different than ours, completely, functionally. So, lots of ways to look at history. But yeah, I know we're philosophers. What do you want?
We started this podcast talking about Blackula, and now we're on. This is why I love you guys.
Want to talk about Heidegger's being in time? Tell us about Heidegger's being in time, everybody.
Wouldn't Frankenstein have been more appropriate for the theme?
Although
it's an infinitely worse movie.
My list of regrets just got longer, except for the fact that I would have had to have remembered Frankenstein again. It's like
I have to admit, I did not rewatch Frankenstein before this. I didn't think we'd be commenting on it, but
okay, go ahead, please.
I would like to throw out there, and then maybe we should move forward into the mad science category, is that the Romantics, of which Shelley was. Wow.
Sorry, I'll stop sharing that now.
I have lost my train of thought. So Shelley, being herself a romantic, part of the theme of both the first and second wave romantics was that they were disappointed with the French Revolution, right? Like Wordsworth himself was there and had a French wife and a child and had to flee France because of the Jacobins were basically arresting and executing English people largely at random, even if they were there to help the revolution, and never saw, I don't think, his wife again, his French wife. So, because she died before he could see her, before he could go back to France, if I'm remembering correctly. So you have this feeling amongst the Romantics that you can't achieve revolutionary results through politics. It has to be achieved through art. It has to be achieved through paintings and poetry and novels. Only artistic means can liberate the human soul because the political means have failed. That is the running theme behind all of the Romantics, including the second wave of which Shelley was a part. So you have a spirit of revolution running through things like Frankenstein, but not a political revolution, a revolution in the way you view the universe, in the way you think about the soul and about individual liberty and nature. So, and now, John, maybe you can lead us forward into more mad science.
Well, I suppose they also, again, maybe were a bit appalled by the French Revolution's turn because it insisted on an absolute divorce from anything of the mystic or mythological, including the days of the names of the months. Where, for example, there was no July, there was Thermidor, because they wished to divorce the language from ancient mythological derivations, and that became a dogma. I mean, not simply coming up with new terms that they believed to be more rational than the traditional names for months and days and so on, but just this idea that if it wasn't scientifically derived, if there was any hint of sentimentality about it that it should be expunged, and it just reflected the callousness and cruelty that eventually overtook the French Revolution, where it started off with very lofty goals, but indulged in greater and greater cruelties to enact these goals.
When you start with the Marquis de Lafayette and get to Robespierre, you've gone down a long way.
Yeah.
So I agree.
Go ahead, please. Sorry, go ahead.
The French revolutionaries were the originators of the concept of a revolutionary year zero. That is, history does not exist before us; it starts now. And this has proven very popular with revolutionaries across the political spectrum ever since, of all kinds.
I mean, you can even look at the worst example would probably be Pol Pot, and where they decided that they were going to eradicate the concept of urban life and cities, and what they did to forcing people in cities to suddenly become subsistence farmers, marching them out of bayonet point, murdering anyone who had glasses because they were presumed to be intellectual, because they were presumed to be readers. I mean, so
I should point out, Pol Pot, educated in Paris by the French.
There we go. I did not. Yeah,
absolutely. So. He had a formal Academy Parisian education.
And if we want to tie it back to Godzilla, the Khmer Rouge was enabled really by the pernicious illegal bombing campaign that Nixon undertook, which essentially ended up wiping out counter forces of the Khmer Rouge. So if you want to relate that back to the atom bomb testing that inspired Godzilla, so. Once again, the destructive power of modern day weapons leading to even greater horrors.
The supernatural horror of Robert McNamara.
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of easy to connect the dots between this revolutionary period and what we see in the novel and in the movie, because it's about this intellectual elite trying to impose an idea they're in love with. Creating new life, stealing the secrets of life and death, and the literal torch wielding mob. It's like they walked off the street, walked away from watching the guillotining onto the Universal backlot, and they're still animated by that, to borrow a line from Mean Girls, stop trying to make Thermidor a thing. They're not having it. So some definite connections there.
I'd like to point out that in the 31 Frankenstein, the movie was supposed to end. Whale wanted the movie to end, the director, James Whale, with the final scene at the windmill, the windmill's burning, Dr. Frankenstein's presumably broken and soon to die corpse being hauled away, the monster screaming piteously, literally like a child on fire. That's where he wanted to leave it. Now that's a horror film. But the producers looked at that and went, that's a bummer.
Yeah.
And so they had to film the additional 4 or 5 minutes of Dr. Frankenstein healing up in a hospital bed at the Baronial Palace with all sorts of frumpy German maids running around and his fiancée. The problem was that the actual actor that played Dr. Frankenstein was already back in England doing a play. So I think it might have been his dentist. It might have been his chiropractor. A foreshadowing of Ed Wood.
I thought that was in Plan. Wait,
Plan.
There was a Plan 9 from Outer Space where Bela Lugosi just became too ill at the.
Yes.
They needed reshoots, and so his chiropractor.
Yeah.
John, we're getting an echo from you, my friend.
Cool. Let me see what I can do.
But yes. Bela shot some footage for an Ed Wood project called the Ghoul Goes West, the Vampire Goes West, and Ed had that footage lying around when his rent came due. and he was able to convince his Baptist landlords to donate the money that they were saving to do a series of Bible epics, so that he could take those 2 minutes of Bela Lugosi footage and turn it into this giant monster hit, Plan 9. And he got his wife's chiropractor, Dr. Tom Mason, to fill in the rest of the scenes, unconvincingly, to say the least.
Well,
Right. I have my own problems with us.
at least we're on the mad science theme.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
Is that better?
Yes.
That was good now, sir. Thank you.
Yes. Mike, you're being quiet. I don't want to shut you out of this. So
I'm letting the smart people talk.
Please talk. Jump in.
Oh, I've got some random thoughts about how mad science is sort of, maybe, it's on one hand, it's a reaction against the industrial age and the industrial revolution, and a yearning against its perceived failures and a yearning for a more natural pastoral life. And also it's kind of mixed up, with, themes of the failures of the previous generation, and look at this monstrosity we have to deal with their failure. And I couldn't think of a funny way to phrase that, so I was letting the two smart essayists talk while I tried to formulate that. So that was the reason behind my my silence. I was trying to figure a way I could bring it all home with a Venture Brothers reference, but alas, the opportunity did not present itself. So yeah, so here I am.
Over in the comments section, Sean Vieira has an interesting comment, if I might read it out.
Yes.
He says, wonder if the villagers with pitchforks in the movie unconsciously suggests Luddites. Interesting thought. John? Or Mike?
That is a good question. I think I don't know what James Whale intended them to be in the film. Obviously in the tech context of the film, their actions were justified. Whether in a greater context, he wanted them to be a metaphor of, armed resistance through brute force to whatever science was unleashing to be ultimately futile. I don't know. That's speculation.
My reading is that Whale thought it would look really visually impressive and scary to villagers with torches and pitchforks. I honestly, I spent some time trying to read things from his life into the film. And this has been in people that study and write about queer theory, for example, talking about Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein and his life, because he was gay, is like a pretty widely explored topic.
There was the film Gods and Monsters, which explored that.
Yeah, Gods and Monsters was about his life. Yeah. However, if I might quote, I believe his lover of 20 years said publicly, James Whale didn't put any of his private life into his work. That it wasn't really about that. But it's hard to say. I mean, what's in there, like as far as subtext goes. So we could say, well, yeah, these are Luddites reacting against the mad science because look, they're primitive. They might as well be playing Hank Williams Jr. and be driving pickup trucks up the side of the hill to the windmill. But I think Whale was the more of the kind of artist director of the sort that we see a lot more of, I think, moving forward from Hitchcock, who really just like presenting you with some really shocking imagery. It looked good, right? It looked like the sort of thing he was trying to say. So that's my guess.
My half joking answer is the thing that eventually forces the Laemmle family to give up the studio in 1935 is because the founder of Universal, Carl Laemmle, was literally trying to bring as many of his relatives over from Germany, like third and fourth cousins. And what eventually drove them to bankruptcy was they couldn't afford to pay all the Laemmle cousins that had been brought over and put on payroll. So my own half joking theory for the crowd scene is everybody in that crowd scene is a Laemmle cousin. And it came from Carl coming to James Will. Can you find a spot for my 234 cousins? Is there anything in there for my 234 cousins?
That's actually apropos of very little. That's actually one of the reasons that MC Hammer ended up going bankrupt.
Yeah.
He employed all his friends and relatives to go up on stage at his tours, his stage shows, and even if they were just there to like stand in the background. So
I actually have a connection with MC Hammer.
let's hear the burst of fame.
Do tell.
He spoke at my nephew's graduation. They live in the same suburb of San Francisco, and it's a small charter school. Like, get in San Francisco and drive out until all you see are cows and windmills. That's the suburb. And Hammer has very affordable rates, and he will come speak at your graduation. And he's in the neighborhood, so they pull him in. And he doesn't wear the pants. The pants are extra, but he will come and tell your kids to study hard and congratulate them on their great achievement. And yeah.
So we've done Pam Grier, we've done Robespierre, we've done MC Hammer. I don't know about the rest of y'all. I've almost got bingo here on my Ghost Show bingo card here.
Can I tie into Sean Vera's Luddite remark just real fast?
Please do.
You guys ever read Devil in the White City by Eric Larson?
No.
Okay. It's about the 1893 Chicago World's Fair, which was also the first public emergence of a serial killer in modern American. Yeah, there was a guy who was running a hotel.
That
guy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Monroe, right? Or was that an alias?
I can find that real fast.
Was he the guy with all the life insurance scams he was running?
Yes.
But he had a literal house of horrors. It was a charnel house.
He went by H.H. Holmes.
H.H. Holmes.
Yeah, and had a house of horror, and he was providing lots of bodies to medical schools. And they were eager to not ask too many questions because they'd gotten in trouble for things like grave robbing because it was hard to find cadavers in those days. And one motive the author returns to over and over again is how people from the American rural areas moving to Chicago, and a lot of them were for work, perceived the city as a demonic, persona. It was fast, it was technological, there were horrible things happening. If you worked in the slaughterhouses, you saw horrible things every day, and just kind of the contrast of the idea of the city on the hill, the city of progress, with the day-to-day experience, which a lot of people coming from much quieter places saw as a mixture of evil and technological at the same time. I just wonder if that wasn't a gut reaction of a lot of people, during that part of the Industrial Revolution, coming from a more peaceful, pastoral, might be grinding poverty, but they weren't getting run over by streetcars or having to kill steers with bolt guns for 12 hours a day. So yeah, it's kind of reminds me of that, and I just wonder if there was part of that idea in the zeitgeist when she was writing this. So I don't know, just a thought.
I just did a quick. I might have disappeared for a few seconds while I was doing the quick lookup where. I remember reading about him. Also, not Monroe, he went by the alias of Mudgett as well. Mm-hmm. And literally, when this was uncovered, he had created this mansion with all sorts of hidden rooms and trap doors and chutes that it was something out of what we think of as a bad cliched movie, with trapdoors that would open underneath people's feet and chutes that deposited them into the sub basement. And
he liked to kill with gas. He liked to be outside the room while they were, which it's a scientific method of execution. It's just I don't know. It makes you wonder. There's a lot of things tied up in that book, and Walt Disney's father was working in the construction of the World's Fair. And there's a few paragraphs speculating that maybe all those days when he would take Walt to see how they were building this beautiful white city, that it inspired Walt to one day do what Walt did. So, and whether or not that's true or is just editorial largesse, but it's an interesting book, and that theme seemed relevant to what we were talking about. So, anyway, hopefully the conversation did.
Isn't there a conspiracy theory that Holmes and Jack the Ripper were one and the same, based on all sorts of dates in which Holmes was in London and all sorts of other things.
I was not aware of that. Holmes had a great deal of concrete poured in his grave posthumously to prevent anyone from exhuming his body. So it's possible.
The MOs are also markedly different. I mean, I said like the MOs, the pattern is markedly different.
Oh yeah, no argument. It's just I remember hearing and reading about this very complicated conspiracy theory put forward, I think, by one of Holmes' descendants, based on some diaries that may or may not really exist. that the two are one and the same. There's a very elaborate conspiracy theory about it. Just seemed entertaining enough to bring up for the audience. Since we're sidebarring off sidebarring.
Well, actually,
many years ago.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Many years ago, about Walt Disney being inspired. I'm sorry, John. Go ahead.
Oh no! I was saying if we do want to get back on track, I suppose we can dovetail into how even though there was sort of a stasis or a pause between the original Frankenstein films, with Universal horror almost exclusively focusing on like the supernatural, Dracula and the Wolfman and so on. It was certainly the inspiration for the early Atomic Age horror, which includes films not only like them with the giant creature films and the Daikaiju films, but then also even you had a lot of sort of literally men made into monsters by science, such as there was one called the Wolfman. No, not the Wolfman. The Werewolf. I'm experiencing audio problems again.
I think it's interesting you bring up them. Because one of the fascinating subtexts of them, if anyone wants to step in on this, is that almost every single besides the fact that them's like the first Hollywood film to say, yes, your government will imprison you for telling you the truth. That's one thing that happens in them. Another one is that there's a theory that kind of everyone in them has PTSD. That everyone in it has fought in World War I, because when they're handing the characters the flamethrowers, the characters make comments like, "Oh, I haven't used one of these in a while," like implying that they were in the Pacific Theater.
World War II.
Yeah, in World War II. That the implication is that all the characters are World War II veterans, and they're all perhaps somewhat traumatized in any case. So, or might be reading too much into it, but
we never do that.
Yeah.
I was thinking like going back to sort of the more human scale monsters. There was a very early obscure like Adam Age horror film called, and I believe it was called The Werewolf.
Columbia, 1956, just came out on Blu-ray.
Okay, which indeed was a science created I think an atomic radiation like medical experiment which created lycanthropy. There was also I think an underrated, very cool entry in the field called the Hideous Sun Demon.
Yes.
Whom I actually created a pastiche of for a superhero campaign that was that saw publication a few years back. I created the Hideous Sun Goblin because why not?
I like that. Okay. All righty. Well, we're down to around our last 10 minutes, and while I don't want to derail what has been a marvelously random and highbrow chat, given that we are a movie-related podcast, I do like to kind of add to the mission of our Everyone's Gone to the Movies book series, and kind of direct people to films in these very, very, very long running genres that may have fallen between the cracks and deserves more attention. So I want to ask each of you gentlemen if you have a favorite Frankenstein or Mad Scientist movie, and just in case you need a minute to think about it, I'm just going to throw my choices out there first, and then we'll go around the horn. So if you need another minute to think about it, go ahead, because I think I've got my two. Okay. For little scene and freshening up the story, I've always been inordinately fond of a Canadian film called Dr. Frankenstein on Campus, which taps into the notion of Dr. Frankenstein being a revolutionary against goodness and decency and right, but it also ties it in with the generation gap, which to me kind of calls it back to how, the relative youth of Percy Bysshe Shelley and Mary Shelley and those people, it takes it back sort of an essential element of their initial rebellion. It recasts Frankenstein as a college student, and their twist on it is that Frankenstein becomes the most popular guy on campus because he's using his like hyper evil intelligence to thwart the old white guy administration. So the time that like he's blatantly having people killed for his medical experiences, no one cares because he's seen as this hip cool guy who's sticking it to the man, and just bringing back that element of youthful rebellion that was there in his creators always makes me smile. And the other film I would nominate for the exact opposite reasons is the classic Al Adamson film Dracula versus Frankenstein, which you really owe it to your perception of reality to see at least once, because it's made up of pieces of 5 different movies. It's like that old joke about the weather. If you don't like the genre that Dracula versus Frankenstein is currently exploring, wait 5 minutes and it'll be something else. Because it's partly a biker movie, it's partly a mad scientist movie, it's partly the director's wife's entire Vegas lounge act, it's Lon Chaney's last film, it's J. Carrol Nash's last film, it's the only film with the director's stockbroker playing Dracula, the immortal Zandor Varkov. It's probably my favorite Famous Monsters editor Forrest J. Ackerman appearance. And if you get the Blu-ray version, you also get to see the original ending. And one of the reasons I'm sad they changed it is because to me you could win a number of bar bets by telling people there's this Dracula versus Frankenstein movie and it ends with a car chase. Yeah, I mean the ending they went with is bizarre for its own reasons, but just how could you make this 5 movies so together even weirder? We're going to end Dracula versus Frankenstein with a car chase. So yeah, you owe it to yourselves to see it once. Maybe you want to alter yourself chemically beforehand, but that's okay. But enough blathering from me. Jason or John, you guys ready with a pick?
Yeah,
I think John. John, you're up.
Okay. I think probably one of my favorites, like science run amok films, would be the original Fly. Not the original Fly, goodness. Although that is something of a cult classic. But the remake with Jeff Goldblum.
The Cronenberg version, yes.
Yeah. And it had enough. It was Cronenberg enough to be horrifying, but they reined in, some of the excess. So it wasn't just, stomach churning mutilation of flesh, nonstop nausea inducing nightmare fuel. You had that at the very end, but they didn't go excessive with it. It was a lot more about this individual's descent through really no fault of his own, aside from like having a bad night, really having a bad night where he drank a little too much and failed to notice a damn housefly, in his matter transportation chambers. And at first thinking that he is, becoming superhuman, and before realizing, no, it's full blown, I'm transmogrifying into a monstrous new species of one. And you even have a parallel near the ending with Frankenstein, in that you have the Adam, the creature, who coerced Dr. Frankenstein into agreeing to create him a mate, whereas Jeff Goldblum, once he has fallen down the sanity ladder, abducts Gina Davis's character and is going to attempt to turn her into his mate, or I guess it was somewhat grosser than that. They were going to merge into this combined creature. They were going to be a family of one at that point.
Only Cronenberg.
Yeah.
All right, Jason, Mike, you guys have ready for the pick? Jason, you're up.
I'm up. Okay.
Yes.
So I think for a moment I'd like to do a hat tip to the other alternate reality Universal Studios, by which I mean Cinema Mexico in Mexico City. So for my personal favorite mad scientist from south of the border, I will go with the mad scientist from El Santo and the Wax Museum.
Yes.
I've never to this day been able to understand what he's exactly trying to do, but it has to do with kidnapping attractive women, pumping wax in them, and turning them into human panthers or humanoid panthers.
Well, I just got to say,
humanoid panthers.
Poor Blue Demon. I mean, Mills Masquerade gets some props, but poor Blue Demon. I mean, he almost never gets any love when Mexican superhero luchador horror science fantasy films come up. I mean,
and he's
funny you should mention him.
Massively bitter about that.
Yes, he is. He actually
second
is.
Pick. Well, in real life, Blue Demon was not overly fond of Rudy Guzman. That would be El Santo.
Yeah.
They were not best pals.
No.
Blue Demon was always a far more workman-like sort of superhero than El Santo. Santo did a lot of showboating, even in his wrestling movies. If you watch their final movie together with Mil Masquerade's Mystery in Bermuda, a 50-year-old Rudy Guzman is still doing these sort of elaborate moves where he involves him flipping on his side and grabbing people with his legs and all sorts of stuff. And Blue Demon's still just hitting you. Hitting you and choking you. He's a far more workmanlike, far more serious luchador. But I was going to mention, when it comes to wonderful portrayals of Frankenstein's monster, I think I'll go with El Santo and Blue Demon contra los monstruos, against all monsters.
Yes.
Where I believe there's a scene where Dracula is driving around in a dune buggy, picking up the other monsters, picking up the werewolf and Wolfman and picking up Frankenstein. They're all together in it, out looking for Blue Demon and El Santo. So that gets mad props right there. Mike?
I've been thinking a lot about this, and I don't have a really good one because we've been talking about the really good ones for the last hour or so. But anyone see a Joe Piscopo, Vincent Price movie from 1988 called Dead Heat?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
I saw it with a college buddy, and we both were afterward we were we'd rather been doing trigonometry probably.
Yeah, it's not a great movie, but in an attempt to update Frankenstein to a modern setting, you've got a couple of LA cops who start off the movie. I think it's a flashback that they find out they're dead. And they've been reanimated by zombies by a mad scientist who is doing that. And it turns into an 80s buddy comedy revenge film. And it's not great. It's maybe the best Episcopal movie that exists, which is pretty bad. But
how about Wise Guys?
I disagree. I think The Public Eye is Piscopo's best movie.
Piscopo was in The Public Eye?
Okay. I'm a Ouija Fellig fan. What can I say?
I'm thinking of a different movie then. But no, I'm a fan of people trying to take. Oh, okay, I see what you mean. I'm a fan of people trying to take that idea and transport it to a modern setting. I don't know if it's really been done well. Maybe you guys disagree. You guys have seen a lot more horror movies than me. So I give this one marks for the attempt to bring that kind of an old idea into a...
Yeah, I don't think honestly, it wasn't a bad.
Is that really Joe Piscopo?
Like,
Yeah, that's Joe Piscopo.
Yeah.
Are you thinking of another Joe?
I must be thinking of someone else. Hold on.
Are you thinking of Joe Pesci? I think you're thinking of Joe Pesci.
The public
I was thinking of Joe Pesci. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, Joe Piscopo was on Saturday Night Live.
I was like, wait a minute, Joe Pesci doesn't have muscles like that. I'm not thinking about this right. Confused.
Yeah, he was on SNL for like a season or two back in the late '80s.
And, no, he was on for a few seasons. He was he was actually kind of an up and comer along with Eddie Murphy at one point. Obviously, his career did not bloom the way Mr. Murphy's did. He actually made a pretty funny, although it's a very crude and rather raunchy film with Danny DeVito called Wise Guys. But again, it was a film about the kind of low rent mobsters. So, being a bit crude could be expected, maybe should have been expected. And it was actually rather funny, lowbrow but funny.
I think his best known role is probably as the Danny Verman, the main antagonist in the Michael Keaton film Johnny Dangerously.
Johnny Dangerously. Now, which I'm not a big fan of, but I know people who love Johnny Dangerously.
Hey, he's the guy. My mother pinched me once. That guy.
If you watch the great James Cagney film Public Enemy, and then watch Johnny Dangerously is about 1,000 times more funny.
Because you're picking up on all the references.
Yeah,
like his mom, like Johnny Dangerously's mother is the mother from Public Enemy. Is literally she looks like her, she's dressed like her. And the scene where he walks into her apartment and she's like saying, "Oh, I've been doing laundry to make ends meet," and he pulls on the laundry and like 100 pounds of laundry fall on him. It's a direct kind of mocking riff on Public Enemy. So if you've seen all those films, Public Enemy, Little Caesar, stuff like that, it's a much funnier movie. If you haven't, it's not as funny.
All right. Well, gentlemen, it's after 10 o'clock on a school night, so I have to go and get ready for class tomorrow so that I can repay the good people of Virginia for their bequeathment of tax dollars upon my home and this collection. But we'll go around. We'll go around here. Jason, any closing thoughts? Or projects you want to talk about, or
only that I think that Frankenstein as a look, and I think that the actual film, the original film version by
well, Jason seems to be having some demonic possession issues in his IT equipment. So while he's working on that, John, any closing thoughts, projects you want to plug, or anything you want to say?
Just that, I'm looking for inspiration since you were kind enough to invite me to write for the follow-up, Transgressive Science Fiction. I guess we've both been experiencing. Jason and I have both experienced some issues with some science run amok with in terms of our computer audio. Like I said, I was having some galvanism issues with my hair tonight. So I have to admit, nothing immediately springs to mind. I know it's not due till was April, correct?
That's the plan. Yes.
I just, I never like to do. I don't. It was like how I came up with Godzilla. I didn't want to do something that was kind of commonly thought of as transgressive horror. But I didn't want to do something so obscure that almost no one's going to get the references. I always thought that Godzilla was way underrated as horror, and as breaking a lot of rules of storytelling in movies for its era. So I'm going to have to look for something similar with in the science fiction genre.
Dracula versus Frankenstein.
I'm not doing it. I'm not going there.
Okay. All right, Jason, are you good to go?
I think so. Can you hear me?
Yes. So closing thoughts, projects you want to plug?
Well, I said a whole bunch of things before, but we'll drop those. And I think for your upcoming collection on transgressive science fiction, I recommend everyone go on Shudder and watch Seth Ickerman's Blood Machine.
Yes.
I'm really a fan. I'll be writing about it, and I think that Blood Machines proves that you can give a really well-funded Hollywood studio $1 billion, and they can make a bunch of boring, mediocre things, and you can give a bunch of weird French guys in a warehouse $100,000, and they can make something that's really interesting to watch, that asks a lot of the same questions and gives you wonderfully ambiguous answers.
All right, Mike, things you want to plug, closing thoughts, upcoming podcast you'd like to direct our listeners to?
Well, tomorrow at noon, we should be doing another actual play demo, our lunchtime, 1 hour long beat 'em up sessions of the Galaxy's Edge RPG. Galaxy's Edge RPG. Galaxy's Edge is a wildly successful military science fiction novel series, and we're shooting things in their world for 1 hour Mondays at lunchtime. So come see us do that. It's a good time. On this very podcast, or also on the old Sci-Fi Writers Play Old School D&D Twitch channel. And oh my God, that's a long title. They need a shorter title for that. But anyway, that's all I got.
All righty. Well, thank you so much for being with us tonight, gentlemen. Always great to talk to you guys and hear your stories and your insights and tangents that you don't get anywhere else. And thanks everybody for listening. And thank you all for joining us for this hour as we wander into the cinematic wastelands and the world where, if you just suspend your disbelief a little bit, you wind up finding that, hey, it's not just a hillbilly in a rubber mask. There really are monsters at my drive-in kidnapping people. And that's what Ghost Show is all about. So have a spookily good Halloween, and we'll see you soon. And backers, keep an eye on your boxes. The book will be here before long. Take care and happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.
Boy.